The little girl's hair was a galaxy of tight, beautiful coils, a crown she refused to let anyone rule. At 8 years old, Imara Oduya had built an invisible fence around her head. The perimeter was exactly the length of her own arm. If you crossed it, she would flinch so violently it was like a physical blow. Her body would curl inward, a fist closing around an empty space, her shoulders hunching up to protect her neck. Her breath would stop. For 3, sometimes 4 seconds, the air in the loud, echoing gymnasium of the Northside Community Center would cease to exist for her. This happened 5, maybe 6 times a day. A well-meaning volunteer trying to pat her head. Another child reaching for a stray crayon that had rolled too close. Mrs. Okonkwo, the center's director, gesturing too broadly while explaining the rules of a game. Each time, the same silent, seismic reaction. After the flinch, the anger would come. A low, hot tremor that vibrated behind her dark eyes. It was an old anger for a child so young. It wasn't the fleeting frustration of a dropped ice cream cone or a lost toy. It was a deep, foundational rage that had settled into her bones and now held her skeleton together. So, they learned. The other kids gave her a wide berth. The volunteers kept their hands clasped behind their backs when they spoke to her. They talked about it in the break room in hushed, worried tones. She's a sweet girl, but so sensitive. Her grandmother, Petra, had said something happened. She won't let me touch it either. It's been 7 months. 7 months since she'd let her own grandmother, the woman who had raised her since she was a baby, comb the tangles from her hair. The result was a beautiful, chaotic mess, a testament to her trauma. Knots were forming at the nape of her neck, small, tight dreads of neglect. Dust and playground debris clung to the outer edges. Yet, it was still beautiful, a wild halo that framed a face of startling stillness. She had learned to be still. Stillness was safety. If you didn't move, you couldn't be seen. If you weren't seen, you couldn't be hurt. It was the brutal calculus of survival, a lesson no 8-year-old should ever have to learn. From his usual corner, Ezekiel Toussaint watched it all. He saw the flinch. He felt the phantom impact of it in his own chest. He recognized the specific geometry of her fear. He was 62 years old, a mountain of a man carved from patience and regret. For 28 years, he'd been a social worker, wading through the wreckage of families, a job that had sanded down his optimism but had sharpened his sight. He could see the things that weren't there: the missing parent, the empty pantry, the ghost of a man's heavy hand. For the last 21 years, he had also been a member of the Iron Covenant Motorcycle Club. The black leather kuta he wore was a second skin, adorned with patches that told the story of his other life. President, first 9, in memory of Annalise. That last patch, stitched over his heart, was the heaviest. He saw his sister in Imara's defensive posture. Annalise had been 16 when a boy she thought she loved had held her down and cut off her long, beautiful braids with a pair of shears, a punishment for talking to someone else at a party. For a year afterward, she wore a hat. Always. In the house, at the dinner table, in the sweltering heat of August. She, too, had flinched. She, too, had carried an anger that was too big for her body. Ezekiel had been 24 then, young and useless, full of advice and solutions that did nothing to soothe the phantom itch on her scalp or the violation that lived behind her eyes. He tried to fix it. He tried to talk her through it. He tried to make her feel better. He had failed. He learned, slowly and painfully, from his failure. You couldn't fix a wound like that. You couldn't talk it away. You could only sit with it. You could only offer a silent, unwavering presence, a space safe enough for the healing to begin on its own schedule. The whole job was just to bear witness, to be a lighthouse, not a tugboat. The Iron Covenant wasn't a gang. It was a service organization with loud engines. Most of the members were retired cops, firefighters, military men, and a few old social workers like him. They rebuilt playgrounds, delivered groceries to the elderly, and provided a quiet, intimidating presence at the funerals of fallen soldiers to ward off protesters. And every Tuesday and Thursday, from 3:30 p.m. until 6 p.m., Ezekiel sat in his corner of the Northside Community Center gym, a silent, leather-clad sentinel. He was there because Mrs. Okonkwo had once mentioned she needed more positive male role models around. Men who were gentle and steady, men who didn't yell. He watched Imara for 3 weeks. He never approached, he just observed. He saw how she never took off her thin gray hoodie, even when the other kids were sweating through their t-shirts. He saw how she ate her snack, a single packet of saltine crackers, by breaking it into impossibly small pieces inside the wrapper before opening it, consuming the crumbs without a sound. He saw that she never, ever, drew people. She drew houses with no doors. She drew trees with no leaves. She drew mazes with no exit. He recognized the cartography of a trapped soul. He had seen it drawn on 1,000 case files. He saw it in the memory of his sister's face. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his gut, that he could not walk away. He couldn't fix it. He had learned that lesson with Annalise, but he could sit with it. He could be the lighthouse. Hit subscribe if you believe no child should have to build a fortress around themselves just to feel safe. Every child deserves a space to heal. Comment the name of your city, and share this with someone who needs to know that patience is a form of love. The next Tuesday, Ezekiel didn't go to his usual corner. He brought a small fold-up camping stool and set it down about 15 feet away from the low table where Imara always sat to draw. It was a careful calculation, not close enough to be a threat, but not far enough to be ignored. He had placed himself in her periphery. He didn't look at her. He unpacked his own supplies from a worn leather satchel, a large, thick sketchbook, a stick of charcoal, and a blending stump. He opened the book to a fresh page and began to draw. He drew the basketball hoop at the far end of the gym. He was meticulous, focusing on the way the light from the high windows caught the fraying edges of the net, the dents and scuffs on the orange rim. He was a decent artist, a skill he'd picked up during long, thankless hours of hospital vigils and courtroom waits. For 2 hours, he sat and drew. He was aware of every shift in the air around him. He knew the exact moment Imara stopped drawing her doorless house and looked up at him. It was a glance, no more than 2 seconds. Her eyes, wide and assessing, took in his large frame, the black vest, the patch over his heart, and the gentle scratching sound of charcoal on paper. Then, her attention snapped back to her own page. He didn't acknowledge her glance. He kept drawing. When 6 p.m. came, he carefully packed his materials, folded his stool, and left without a word. He did the same thing on Thursday, and the following Tuesday, and the Thursday after that. For 3 weeks, 12 hours in total, he sat 15 feet away and drew. He drew the bleachers. He drew a discarded jump rope. He drew the pattern of the scuff marks on the polished wood floor. He never drew her. He never spoke to her. He just existed in her space, a quiet, predictable constant. She began to test him. One afternoon, she accidentally dropped a red crayon. It rolled across the floor and stopped a few feet from his stool. She froze, watching him. Her whole body was a question. "What will you do?" He saw the crayon. He saw her watching him. He didn't move. He didn't bend to pick it up. He didn't look at her. He continued shading the side of a metal water fountain he was sketching. He was giving her control. It was her crayon, her decision, her space. After a full minute, a minute that stretched into an eternity in the loud gym, she scurried from her chair, snatched the crayon, and retreated back to her table. The test was over. He had passed. He hadn't invaded her territory. The next week, he brought 2 bottles of cold water. He set one on the floor beside his stool, and the other on the floor exactly halfway between his stool and her table. Again, he said nothing. He just drew. He could feel her looking at the bottle. It sat there for an hour, condensation beating on its sides, a silent offering with no strings attached. Near the end of the session, she walked over, picked it up, and took it back to her table. She didn't drink it, but she took it. It was a victory so small it was almost invisible, but to Ezekiel, it felt monumental. He started leaving a small offering every time, a bottle of water, a granola bar, an apple. Sometimes she took it, sometimes she didn't. He never commented either way. The offering was the point, not the acceptance. It was a message. I see you. I expect nothing. I am here. The silence between them finally broke on a Tuesday in late October. He was sketching the intricate design of his own motorcycle boot when he heard a tiny voice, thin as a spider's thread. "Why do you draw?" He didn't look up immediately. He finished the line he was working on, a slow, deliberate motion. Then, he lifted his head and met her gaze for the first time. She was looking right at him, her chin barely above her tabletop. "It makes the world feel quiet," he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. She considered this for a long moment. She looked at her own drawing, another maze, more complex than the last. "It doesn't work for me," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Maybe not yet," he said. That was all. But it was everything. If you're enjoying this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps this video reach more people who need to see it. Now back to the story. Their conversations after that were like building a bridge out of matchsticks. Fragile, painstaking work, one sentence at a time, over days and weeks. "What's her name?" she asked one day, pointing a small finger at the patch over his heart. "Annalise," he said. "She was my sister. Is she in the sky?" He took a slow breath. "Yes, she is." "My mom is in the sky," she offered. "My grandma said she got sick." He saw the opening, the small crack in the wall she had built, but he didn't push. He just nodded. "That's a hard thing," he said. The following week, the dam began to break. He was there, sketching, and she was unusually still. She wasn't drawing. She was just staring at her hands, which were clenched in her lap. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. It was the way a person recites a grocery list. He said my hair was too pretty. Ezekiel's hand stopped moving. The charcoal stick was frozen over the page. He didn't speak. He just listened. The entire gym, with its bouncing balls and shouting children, seemed to fall away. There was only this small girl and her enormous burden. He was my grandma's boyfriend. His name was Ron. He said pretty things get broken. He liked to brush it. At first, it was nice. My grandma was at work. He would sit behind me and brush it. For a long, long time. And then one night, he used his hands. Not the brush. He pulled it. He pulled it so hard. He said, if I ever told anyone, he would cut it all off, like he did to my Barbie. She finally looked up at him. Her eyes were not wet. They were ancient. I didn't tell. But he's gone now. My grandma made him go away. But my hair still remembers. It remembers his hands. That's why I can't let anyone touch it. It's not my hair anymore. It's his. The devastating simplicity of her words landed in Ezekiel's chest like a physical weight. He felt the old, familiar rage rise in him, the impotent fury of his 24-year-old self. But he pushed it down. That anger was his, not hers. She didn't need his rage. She needed his calm. He put his charcoal down carefully. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and let the silence sit for a moment, validating the gravity of what she had just said. "He was wrong," Ezekiel said, his voice thick but steady. "It is not his. It was never his. It has always been yours. Your hair is yours. Your body is yours. He was a thief, and he tried to steal something that didn't belong to him." He leaned forward just an inch. "What he did to you, it was not your fault. It was never your fault." For the first time, a tear escaped her eye. It traced a clean path through the grime on her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "My sister, Annalise," he continued softly. "Someone hurt her once. They hurt her hair. For a long time, she said it felt like it belonged to someone else, too. She said it felt like it was wearing a ghost." Imara's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition. She wasn't the only one. "What did she do?" she whispered. "She got angry," he said. "She cried. She hid. And then one day, she decided she wanted it back. It took a long time, but she took it back. She learned how to make it hers again." He didn't offer any solutions. He didn't tell her what to do. He just sat there, a witness to her pain, and told her two things she had probably never heard before. "It's yours, and it's not your fault." She didn't say anything else that day, but when she left, she took the apple he had left for her, and for the first time she took a bite out of it before she got to the door. If Bike Diaries has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. And hit that hype button if you haven't already. Now back to the story. Ezekiel knew he had reached the edge of what he could do alone. The next morning, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to Mrs. Okonkwo. He told her, in careful professional language, what Imara had shared. He didn't betray the girl's confidence, but he outlined the clear signs of significant trauma that required professional intervention. Mrs. Okonkwo listened, her sighs heavy with a sorrow he knew well. "I knew it was bad, Zeke. Petra, her grandmother, she tries so hard. She's working 2 jobs, she's exhausted. She told me he was gone, but she never said that." "I know," he said. "She needs help too. She's a secondary victim in this. Can we find a therapist? Someone who specializes in this? The club can cover the cost, no questions asked." The Iron Covenant had a fund for exactly this purpose, money quietly raised at their annual charity ride. It was called the Annalise Fund. His second call was to his club's vice president, a retired contractor named Marcus. He explained the situation at the community center. "The grandmother is overwhelmed," Zeke explained. "The kid needs stability. She needs to see good men. Men who build things, not break them." "Say no more, Prez," Marcus said. "The community garden out back of that place is a mess. We can fix the raised beds, plant some late-season stuff, be around, just being there. We know the drill." The following week, the change began. A gentle, unassuming woman named Dr. Anya Sharma began visiting the center. She had warm eyes and never wore perfume. She didn't try to talk to Imara right away. Instead, she set up a table with modeling clay. She just made things, her hands busy, her presence calm. Outside, 4 members of the Iron Covenant, including Marcus, began to work on the neglected garden. They were quiet giants in leather and denim, measuring boards, sawing wood, turning soil. They never approached the kids directly, but they were there. A constant, reliable presence of men engaged in constructive, gentle work. They would nod at the kids. Sometimes they'd leave a few extra sweet carrots they'd found on the picnic table. Ezekiel also sat down with Petra, Imara's grandmother. He met her at a diner after her shift at the hospital, before her shift at the convenience store. Her face was etched with exhaustion. Her hands trembled as she held her coffee cup. "He hurt her," she whispered, tears she had held back for months finally falling. "I didn't know how bad. I thought I was protecting her by getting him out. But the monster is gone, and the ghosts are still in my house. I don't know what to do." I try to comb her hair, and she screams. I feel like I'm failing her. "You are not failing her," Ezekiel said, his voice firm but kind. "You are surviving an explosion. You got her out. You saved her life. That was the whole job. Now, we just have to help you both pick up the pieces. You can't do that alone. No one could." He connected her with a support group for families of trauma survivors. He gave her the number for a legal aid society that could help her formalize a restraining order just in case. He told her the Iron Covenant would cover the therapy costs for as long as it took. For the first time in a long time, Petra Oduya didn't look completely alone. Progress with Imara was measured in millimeters. She started sitting at the table next to Dr. Sharma, not with her, but next to her. She started using the clay, making small, lumpy animals. One day, she looked one of the bikers in the garden in the eye and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, which he returned with a slow, gentle smile. She stopped drawing mazes with no exits. Now, her mazes had one, tiny, winding path that led to the outside of the page. The breakthrough came on a cold Tuesday in December. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. The gym was decorated with paper snowflakes and strings of popcorn. Ezekiel was there, on his stool, sketching. Imara was at her table, not drawing, just sitting. There was a new tension in her, a coiled energy. After an hour of silence, she got up from her chair. She walked over to her backpack and unzipped it. She pulled something out. It was a wide-toothed comb, an old one made of hard black plastic. She walked toward Ezekiel. His heart hammered in his chest, but his hands remained steady on his sketchbook. This was it. This was the moment. He had to get it right. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He had to let her be in charge. She stopped in front of him, just outside the perimeter of his knees, her own invisible fence. She stood there for a long time, just looking at him, her eyes searching his for something: trust, safety, permission. Then, with a hand that trembled slightly, she held out the comb. She didn't ask him to use it. She didn't ask for help. It was a gesture that hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. It was a question. It was a statement. It was an offering. "This is the weapon that was used against me. I am showing it to you. I am trusting you with the sight of it." Ezekiel looked from the comb to her face. He saw the fear there, but underneath it, he saw a sliver of something else: defiance. The will to take her power back. He did not reach for the comb. That was the most important thing he would ever do for her. He did not take it. To take it would be to take control. Instead, he gave her a slow, small nod. He looked at her magnificent, tangled, beautiful hair. "It's beautiful hair, Imara," he said, his voice softer than he thought possible. "You have beautiful hair." Then he added the words that Annalise had needed to hear all those years ago, the words he hadn't known to say. "You get to decide," he said. "You are the only one who decides who touches it. You are the one in charge. Always." A single tear rolled down her cheek, then another. She didn't sob. It was a quiet, wrenching grief, the silent weeping of a child who had finally been given permission to feel her own pain in a safe place. She stood there, crying silently, holding the comb. Ezekiel didn't move. He didn't try to comfort her. He didn't offer a hug or a platitude. He just sat there, his presence a silent testament. He was the lighthouse, steady and unwavering, as her storm finally broke. He was bearing witness. That was the whole job. After a few minutes, her tears subsided. She lowered her hand, still clutching the comb. She looked at it, then back at him. She gave him a tiny, watery, but genuine smile. It was the first one he had ever seen. She turned and walked back to her table. She sat down and placed the comb on the table beside her piece of paper. She didn't use it. Not yet. But it was there. It was no longer hidden. It was no longer a secret. It was just an object. Its power was beginning to fade. Thank you for watching this story about Imara, a brave little girl learning to reclaim her power, and Ezekiel, a biker who understood that the greatest strength is patience. The trauma Imara experienced is tragically common. According to the CDC, at least 1 in 7 children have experienced abuse or neglect in the past year. And for many, the path to healing is long and difficult. But healing is possible. It starts with creating safe spaces, offering patient support, and empowering survivors to take back control. It starts with believing them and telling them, over and over, that it was not their fault. If you or a child you know needs help, please reach out. Resources like the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline are available 24/7 at 1-800-4A-CHILD. You can also connect with RAIN, the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization. Your call is confidential. You are not alone. Subscribe to Bike Diaries for more stories about hope and healing. Hit that hype button to boost this video and help it find the people who need it most. And if you want to support what we do, the membership link is below. Share this with everyone who needs to remember that true healing isn't about fixing someone. It's about giving them the safe space to fix themselves. 3 months later. Spring was breathing life back into the city. The community garden behind the center was thriving with green shoots of lettuce and spinach. Ezekiel was on his stool, but today he wasn't sketching. He was just watching. Across the gym, Imara sat on the floor with a younger girl, a 5-year-old named Sophia, who had just moved into the neighborhood. Sophia's hair was long and straight and messy from playing. Imara was talking to her, her voice soft. Doctor. Sharma was nearby, pretending to read a book, but watching. Imara held a new comb, a bright pink one she had picked out herself. Does it get tangly? Imara asked. Sophia nodded, pouting a little. Mommy tries, but it hurts. Imara nodded, a solemn, knowing nod. Sometimes it does, she said. You have to be gentle. You have to go from the bottom up, like this. And with a slow, careful hand, Imara Oduya reached out and gently took a strand of Sophia's hair. She started at the very end, working out a tiny knot with the patience of a bomb disposal expert. She hadn't let anyone touch her own hair yet. Her grandmother said she was letting her wash it now, at least. That was a start. But this was something more. She was reclaiming the action. She was transforming an act of violence into an act of care. She was teaching another little girl what she now knew to be true. You have to be gentle. You are in charge. The power was returning to her hands, one strand at a time.